Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I would like, first of all, thank you very much the municipality of both Bottrop and Essen, and also Raggi Immobilier. I'm sorry, my pronunciation of German is not perfect. Although, like, despite my surname, I don't speak German. I'm the CEO of Carlo Ratti Associati, and we call ourselves an innovation and design firm. So we started working in architecture, like Carlo Ratti founded the company 12 years ago. But now we work across very different scales of design because we deal a lot with technology and everything becomes very fluid. So I will go through a quick presentation, about 15 minutes, about what we call sensible cities. Okay, everyone calls them smart cities, but we call them sensible cities. And we want to give a human touch to technology. I will start with a very brief vision introduction, and then I will go through 3 different themes, showing you some projects that we have developed in the field of urban design and smart cities. So vision first. Let's go back to about like 25 years ago. This is an image of virtual reality. At that time, it was a common belief that as the phone had killed the concept of distance, internet would have killed the concept of space. So we always quote this sentence from George Gilder, that he used to say cities are just a leftover baggage from the industrial area. So at that time, it was a common belief that urban environments and space in general didn't have any meaning anymore because everything would have been moved to virtual, you know. Actually, we know that things turn in a very different way. This is a picture from a master plan we worked on. It's called Dubai Creek Harbour. Actually, the picture is from Calatrava. We participated to a part of it. But this is the big picture, and it shows one of the largest real estate intervention ever done in human history, and it's now under development. As well as data from the United Nations Population Funds, reminds us that since 2008, more of the half of the worldwide population is living into cities, and this number is increasing. This is giving actually a lot of power to cities, you know. I like that the master plan has this fly high part, you know, that reminds the old, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, I know that it's not the best. I did practice with Jennifer in the car, but basically, I mean, it reminds us the importance that cities had maybe in the medieval time and that they have now. Cities, just a few numbers, they cover 2% of the crust of the planet. They have more of the 50% of the worldwide population, 70% of the energy consumption, and 80% of the CO2 emission. Why do they have power? Because just working on cities, we do impact on a number of significant issues that we have today. So let's go back to the reasoning that I was doing. So basically, what happened? It happened that digital didn't kill physical space, didn't kill cities, but didn't leave it unaffected though. So a layer of digital technologies is little by little, I mean, and not so little, faster and faster, is integrating with the physical space. And this is providing a number of new ways of living the city, interacting with other people, enjoying free time, and so on. It's basically radically changing and improving the way we live into cities, and it's actually bringing new opportunities. In the long term, it's actually thinking about the Internet of Things. We envision that this integration between physical world and digital technologies will be more and more advanced, and we will reach a point in which every atom will kind of be a sensor and an actuator, so that the interaction with the city and with the physical space in general be very much seamless and part of our natural way of living. So, as I was saying, this is more or less the vision we apply to our research, and I will go through 3 different themes. You know, I mean, speaking about cities involves a number of different themes. I would concentrate on 3 also because I know that in previous workshops you already worked on ways of working and mobility. So I will focus on sensing, experiencing, and well-being. So let's start with sensing. And why do I start with sensing? Because actually, before doing a design process and trying to change the reality we live in, we should very well understand the way it works. I understand that the site you're working on is actually almost empty. Nobody works and live anymore in the area. But it's anyway important to understand at least the dynamics of the surrounding cities, to understand what are the possible interaction with the surroundings and how we can really reconnect the site to us and the other cities. So I wanted to present to you a project that dates back to 2010, but I haven't seen anything similar lately. It's a project that we did in UK, and we started mapping all the mobiles call within the country. Okay, so every line that you see is one strong stream of calls, and these represent more or less the country as it is developed with calls. But what if we understand proximity and relation within the country based on calls? Well, we see a number of interesting dynamics that you see in different colors that sometimes reflect the real boundaries between the different regions of the UK, but most of the time they don't, as you see in this one. Okay, so data analysis in a project like this, in a very simple way, using data that are already available, obviously they're anonymized data, they allow us to understand the actual relations about existing part of the cities. And this can have an impact on the way we design new parts or we change them. So it's a completely different way of understanding the boundaries between cities, regions, and countries. If this project was relying on existing data, we call these projects viral sensing, because we get the virus and we analyze the data as virus does in a human body. We also need in time, and once the projects start being developed, to integrate ad hoc sensor networks that can collect data from the operations of the site. And this is a case that we did with the city of Copenhagen. So we developed this wheel. It's called Copenhagen Wheel. That can be retrofitted in any kind of bicycle, transforming the bicycle itself into an electric hybrid. This was primarily done to increase even more the number of bikes in Copenhagen. But we take a chance to integrate within each bicycle a pollution sensor, so that we could have a distributed and kind of live network of sensors moved by the citizens to understand the quality of the air and the level of pollution within the city. The data was both relevant for the citizens to understand what is the best path that I can follow to go to work or to go home where the pollution is lower, but also to detect the health status of the city in real time through a dynamic network of sensors that we created ad hoc in this specific project. Moving to the second part, so from sensing to interacting. Why it's so important as a second step in designing a city or a piece of city? Because a city is not primarily done by buildings and streets, but it's done by people. Especially if we start from a green field or a brown field, where we have to create a sense of place. We have to create an identity, also to communicate, attract people, and make it really a live place. In this case, if we think about urban design, we all know, what Le Corbusier said in 1931 with La Charte Athènes. So at that time, the idea was really that cities were like a kind of a macro level interaction among different zones, So basically, at that time, the idea was, the planning idea was to use zoning into the city. And then in 1960, actually, this was slightly modified by Jane Jacobs, saying James Jacob used to say, you can really build city by large zones because you will reduce interaction at the personal level, and this will basically remove the identity and the quality of life in the city. So James Jacob started to go back to mixed use, saying the city must be a mix of different functions, but we can bring this concept through digital technologies to a further level now. The digital revolution actually allows not just to have different functions in the city, but to overlap these different functions into a same space, so that we can also create cities and public spaces that can change over time based on the different use that is necessary in that specific moment, so that we reduce the number of space that we use, and we use it 100% instead of using just in the moment in which you need it. Creating a sense of place and creating an identity, it's very important also to do successful projects. Why? I mean, if we think about Richard Florida, which defined the concept of creative class as that class of the population that is able to innovate, to produce new ideas. Richard Florida shows with a very simple diagram on how much is important the place to attract talent and to produce innovation. So on the left, you see the worldwide population as it is in the world now. And on the right, you actually see the number of patents deposited in the world. And as you will see, the word is pinky, it says, because actually the high number of patents are actually in very specific places in the world. And we can easily recognize them as the Silicon Valley, New York and Boston, some parts of Europe, and Japan, and some cities in China. So it's very important to create a sense of place, to maximize interaction, to attract people, attract talent, and be able at that point to produce innovation. So innovation is, the capability to produce innovation is at the end of the process. We cannot start saying we will do a place for innovation if we don't create a sense of space and a sense of place. For this, I wanted to quote very briefly two projects. One that we have done in Germany, it's a small master plan that we did with IBA Berlin, and the site that IBA Berlin gave us was a former army terminal of the like a U.S. Army terminal in Heidelberg. And the idea was, as I was saying, to bring different functions related to living, working, and also bring production through this idea of overlapping different functions through digital tools. So we developed for this project this concept that we called co-living, co-working, co-making, and we designed a number of shared spaces that can be used by the citizens, both for living, for working, and for producing. How did we do this? Well, if you know the site, it's actually done by these very long linear buildings. So we created this kind of courtyard between the building, and we dedicated the area between the building as the public and shared space. So in this case, you see one of the courtyard between the two buildings that is covered with a TFE technology. And in this case, hosts both spaces for work and for meeting. And on the other side, also space for food production through hydroponic technology. A similar approach, we are applying it also together with Lende and Andreas Kipar in Mind, which is the former Expo site in Milano. So together with Lende, we are the leading designers and architects of the site. And in this case, the idea is again to create a new piece of city that has its own identity, that is not just copying and pasting some experience from another country or from the US, in which you can really create a laboratory for innovation. So the idea of the expo site, of the former expo site, is to create a kind of a test bed at the national, and why not at the European level, for not just developing new ideas, but also testing them at the urban level. So we aim to attract a number of companies that will be able to bring their research and development activities, and at the same time, we provide them a platform in which they can experiment their solutions. How does this impact at the urban planning level? Well, we have to move from what was called a visitor-oriented district. Obviously, the expo site was designed by Herzog and Meron only for the expo. There was no idea for further reuse of the area. So we had to move to a community-oriented design. And we did it through 5 pillars. One of them was actually presented by Andreas before, and it's creating a linear park. So we strongly believe, as I was saying, that outdoor spaces can be a space for meaning, for interaction, and for exchange, of ideas and innovation. So the old Decumano, which is the long street that cut the site into 2, has been designed as a huge linear park in which, through a number of digital technology, we can also improve the microclimate and allow the use of external space throughout the whole year. I will show you some more details about this later. We have created this concept of common ground. So all the ground space of the site will be actually public. Also in every building, the ground floor will be public, will be permeable. Okay, and this will allow not just a very rigid mobility as it was before. There were like 2 main streets, like a cross, but will allow people to spread around very easily, and this will allow communication with across the different areas of site. Open platform, the idea is to create also a digital infrastructure that will allow, as I was saying, companies that work in the different industry to have an infrastructure to develop new ideas and to test them. We also wanted to recreate in the shape of the building what we call the DNA of Milano. So the size of every building will be the size of the typical building in Milano, which is usually a squared plan with an inner courtyard. And also we are thinking about a very innovative mobility plan. Mobility is very much part of, impacts a lot recently on the way we use cities, because a number of different mobility strategies are actually available. Just to give you a very simple example, when Car2Go came to the city I live in Torino, I actually sold my car because I don't need a car anymore, and now there are 1,000 of different ways to move around the city with shared vehicles. And so in this case, the concept is to create within the expo site the first fully self-driving area in Italy. Actually, so far there is no self-driving area, so we hope to be the first one in the world. So only self-driving vehicles will be allowed within the space. These are just a few images of the common ground. As I was saying, this is, you saw it in the presentation before, the Decumano that becomes a huge and linear park that attracts people, and here you see the master plan at large. Also, I put this picture because it shows the importance of the connection with the water, because we have a canal now around the site that was not actually used during the expo, and we now are thinking not to use it as the back of the site, but as the front of the site, so that people can reconnect with the water, and it's actually very powerful for public spaces. Very briefly, I showed you the next project, which is, again, to connect with the last slide, deals with water, okay? Because I saw that in the site you have a river and a canal, so why not to use this as an infrastructure for mobility, but also for creating what we call a reconfigurable infrastructure. I was speaking before about the fact that through digital technology, we can build a city or a space that can change over time because of the needs of the city. So this is one research project. So in Amsterdam, in this case, we are developing these self-driving platforms. There should be a video of the first prototype that we have done. that are basically kind of quadricopters, but in water. They're able to move freely, and they're modular, okay? So they can be used as single platforms for moving people or goods around the city, but they can also aggregate it among themselves to create bridges or platforms, so that this, using an existing infrastructure, which is a river, we can create an additional infrastructure that can change over time based on the needs of the city. So this is an image of how we use it for transporting of goods, but before there was an image of the modules as bridges, and also for people, and we can also create platforms for concerts or events or small markets and so on. Very briefly, I wanted to close with a third point, which I think is very important. Once we have understood the dynamic of the cities, we have created and maximized the occasion for meetings and exchange among the people. We have also to focus on something which is very important, which is well-being. So through new technologies, we can really improve, and we have to improve quality of life into cities. There are a number of methodologies to do that. The one that I wanted to present to you today is the Well Community Standard. I really like this one that comes from California, and is not a case, because in California there's like kind of this paranoia about well-being and health and so on. But it's a very good trend, and it's now arriving to Europe also. And the Well Community Standard is a game changer in a way, because everyone knows the LEED, you know, and LEED, it's a very good protocol, but basically it focuses on the performance of the building and also of the city, you know. If we think about a building, it focuses on the performance of the envelope, of the building system. So it certifies the building or the city itself as a physical object. The Well Building Standard, or the Well Community Standard, which is actually the same protocol but applied to cities, certifies the quality of the space as it is perceived by the user, okay? So it's a game changer in the sense that put the users at the center, you know, and analyzes the senses, and then a number of parameters such as air, water, nutriment, light, fitness, temperature, sound, materials, mind, community, and then moves into a number of strategies so that you really improve the quality of life, and you reach the performance of the building at the end of the process, you know. So you don't start from the technology, but you start from the user, and in the end you understand what is the best technology to get the result that I want, and that really impacts on the person. Few projects that link to this. I wanted to show you two projects, one linked with microclimate, because if we want to improve quality of life into cities, we have to improve microclimate at the city level. Climate change is real. There was a very interesting cover of the Internazionale in Italy, which was the first summer in which we understood that climate change is real. So we have to act on climate change. The second project is on retrofitting nature into the city. So this project is called Living Nature, and we presented it at the Salone del Mobile this year. It's a pavilion that deals with microclimate, as I was saying. So climate change has a big impact over cities. The same environmental condition has an impact which is 20 to 40% more in the city than compared to the countryside, because nature, as Andreas knows well, it's by itself, by definition, a microclimate mitigator. So since people is moving into cities more and more, we have to understand how through technology we can mitigate the microclimate at that level. In this case, we brought this concept at the extreme, and as you saw in the video, we basically recreated the 4 seasons all in one single pavilion, just using photovoltaic panels, as you see here, to use the energy to create the 4 climates within the space. What was the message? The message was we have the possibility to, through renewable energy, mitigate microclimate. We can bring it to the extreme of recreating the 4 seasons. We have, in the moment in which we design cities, through active and passive technologies, try to understand how we can mitigate peaks of climate. And the last project, it's a project, it's actually a small installation, so at the first sight, it might look as something very far from a city project and a master planning project, but actually it's not. It's a project in which we deal with hydroponic technologies, you know. Hydroponic technologies are important for two things. Well, first of all, they're mature, so they're very easy to be implemented, and they allow both to integrate green within existing sites, so they allow to retrofit green spaces into existing buildings, especially industrial buildings, and also they allow food production locally. So this project that was done in Bologna is actually an installation to put people in touch with the technology, which as I was saying, is mature enough, but they don't actually see. So the user is invited to enter the space. It's given a small cube of wool rock. The user plants a seed and put the cube into this solution of water and nutrients that moves in time, and with artificial lights allows like the plant to grow. So the experience can be followed in real time through an app, and when the plant is has grown, the user can go back and pick his salad or basil or whatever he planted. This is the end of my presentation. I hope I brought some ideas and to the discussion, and I really look forward to the next part of the workshop and the conversation that we will have later. Thank you so much.